It might seem like a quaint Irish town, but fierce evangelist Thomas McGill knows better. He knows that jovial Dwayne Flynn is a miserable drunk, that Timmy O'Leary enslaves his lovely mother, and that sweet Mrs. Cleary is a blasphemous flirt. It is down to Thomas, with God on his shoulder, to save this sinful place. But the townsfolk are not listening. An angel is misbehaving and a barking dog will not be silenced. Just how far will Thomas go in his quest for salvation? That is Misterman, and it is, of course, part of the canon of Enda Walsh, one of Ireland's most renowned young playwrights and possibly best known in Cork throughout the country. And Misterman returns home to the Granary Theatre 18 years after it first premiered in 1999. Presented by American company Resolve Productions, Misterman is an examination of a young man's descent into religious mania in small-town Ireland, a terrifying portrait of innocence turned toxic that dares you not to look away. This is a production not to be missed. It's going to be colourful and dark, as you can imagine, if you know anything about Enda Walsh. It is currently running in the Granary, and so you have until tomorrow night to go see it. Tonight and tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Now, I talked to a couple of members of the company earlier on in the week. That is Craig, the lone performer, because it is a one-man show, and Melissa, the director, and I got to see the set as well, and it looks fabulous. It's a very kind of a deliberately run-down looking, broken down kind of scenario, and we talked about that during the interview, actually. And we had a very interesting discussion about the many challenges facing an American company performing an Irish play in Ireland. But I started off, just for the sake of the listeners who are not familiar, by asking Melissa, the director, to give me a bit of a lowdown on the story and the background to Misterman.
Yes, it was written as a one-man show by Enda Walsh. And he read Samuel Beckett's Craps Last Tape, and it's in slight response to that and his own journey. And this man, Thomas McGill, is trying to recreate a day in his life. So he has gone around town tape recording conversations with people. And this is him replaying some of those moments with his version of the story.
So, Craig, you're the only live actor on stage. Do you play the other characters, or do you just play that one character who's responding to all those situations and retelling the situation to the audience?
Yeah, no, Thomas does do his impersonation of the characters. What's fun is that you hear Thomas's version of those characters in stark contrast to who they actually are on the tapes, how they actually sound. And you also come to realize that he's edited those recordings or performances to be a specific way.
Right.
Yeah.
It's your classic unreliable narrator.
Hey!
Obviously enough, Enda Walsh's material is generally, it can be quite dark, and it speaks about universal things, but in a very colourful, possibly over the top, edgy kind of way. What is it in this show that's edgy, that's going to bring people in that they won't see in other shows?
Oh.
I would say that in this version, that I think that Thomas McGill comes across very likable at the beginning, and then as you realize his side of the story, he kind of manipulates you. And you feel played a bit as an audience member. You feel like, wait, you're what? Or you're who? And so that flips on you and gets really dark, what he's done. It's a fine line to tell you too much, because, we want you to come see it, but we don't want to also tell you,
And again, without giving anything away, is he telling this story out of a sense of guilt, or out of a sense of trying to absolve something, to get over something now?
Yeah.
Absolution is such a good word to use connected to the show. Yeah. Right. Yeah. God is Thomas's best friend. So he's trying to absolve himself. Yes.
Yeah, so he's actually evangelical himself.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Is he a sort of a vigilante of God's justice in some ways?
I would say yes, in many ways. What's been interesting for us is that evangelical religion is very prominent in the United States, and so to come here, where it's predominantly Catholic, is a very different environment. So we're also curious about that too.
Yes, it has to be said that the concept of an evangelical character is not really natural to this country.
No, no, it is not. No, even I was raised Catholic in the States, and it doesn't have the same weight or connectivity that it does here. Right, so because the States, even in my hometown, everyone has different backgrounds, even though Catholicism is the biggest thing from where I was raised. But you feel the energy of other religions, where here you feel the Catholicism underneath everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the production. This is your first performance in Ireland, but it's been performed in the States before. How did it feel performing a show by an Irish author featuring predominantly Irish characters? Did it feel like you were on uncertain ground and you weren't sure that you were doing things right in any way, or did you just transpose it to the States and go from there?
I would say that that's something we're actually trying to figure out now in this journey, right? To be in Ireland as an American team, bringing an Irish play to Ireland, right? Because that's exactly what we're doing. So I think that's what we're learning in how the American take on it, and then culturally immersing ourselves around Irish people as we're living amongst everyone and learning from that, and then how does that then influence our work now? Mm-hmm. But when we did it in the States, we did a lot of research and we connected, but it's a very different thing to be here, right? And to it has a different take. And when we found that our audiences, it wasn't any hiccup in seeing the story. The story carries, and the story will, be told.
I think that's what I really like, is that Melissa's been very open to the idea that this is going to, being here in Ireland, is going to change the performance, and she's very much open to working to make sure that it incorporates the sensations of being in this country, and keeping that in mind, that it's going to make a stronger production for the States when we go back. It'll be much more well-informed, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I take it then that the obvious question is, do you do it as an American, or do you try and be an Irishman in the show? I think.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I am.
I would have thought it was an extremely obvious yes or no question.
Yeah.
I am Irish by heritage, but that's about it, And
you play it as an Irish character.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. It's actually in the text. The way the text is written, you can't do anything but. If you, I mean, for the fun of it, once I read through and I was like, I think I stopped within the first 2 pages. I was like, well, this is rubbish. I can't. It wouldn't be worth an exploration.
It's not like you can do Pillowman in the States without an accent, right? Because when they did it on Broadway, they did it without an accent. But do people? Yeah, it's in the writing and in the tempo too, and in the lilt within the text.
Yeah. With that in mind, then, when you first encountered the play, was it a leap to say, "Yeah, we can do this"? Because it must have been so kind of weird. You're constantly kind of hitting speed bumps, just reading the script, going, "How do I say that in order to make it make sense?"
Yeah, I think it's definitely a leap always when you're stepping into another dialect, another culture, another playwright, another world completely. But that's also, those leaps do encounter those speed bumps. But ultimately, I think
My apologies, that cut off suddenly for no particular reason except that the unit that I'm working off ran out of batteries. Let's take some music and we'll see if we can come back with the second half of that interview.
Vous avez lu l'histoire de Jesse James? Comment il vécu? Comment il est mort? Ça vous a plu, hein? Vous en demandez encore? Eh bien, écoutez l'histoire de Bonnie and Clyde. Alors voilà, Clyde a une petite amie. Elle est belle et son prénom c'est
Bonnie.
À eux deux forment le gang Barrow. Leur nom
Bonnie Parker
et Clyde Barrow. Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde.
Moi lorsque j'ai connu Clyde autrefois, c'était un gars loyal, honnête et droit.
Il faut croire que c'est la société qui m'a définitivement abîmé. Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde. Qu'est-ce qu'on n'a pas écrit sur elle et moi?
On prétend que nous tuons de sang-froid.
C'est pas drôle mais on est bien obligé
de faire taire celui qui se met à gueuler.
Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde. Chaque fois qu'un policeman se fait buter,
qu'un garage ou qu'une banque se fait braquer,
pour la police ça ne fait pas de mystère.
c'est signé Clyde Barrow, Bonnie Parker,
Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde. Maintenant chaque fois qu'on essaie de se ranger,
de s'installer tranquille dans un meublé,
dans les toits je vois là les tac-tac-tac.
des mitraillettes qui reviennent à l'attaque.
Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde. C'est pour Bonnie que je tremble.
Quelle importance qu'il me fasse la peau. Moi Bonnie je tremble pour Clyde Barrow.
Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde. De toute façon, il ne pouvait plus s'en sortir.
La seule solution, c'était
UCC 98.3 FM, that is a band called Luna, and the track is called Bonnie and Clyde. Now, before that we were talking about Misterman, and I was talking to director Melissa and performer Craig about the show, which is currently running in the Granary. Then there was a technical hitch involving batteries, and I wasn't sure if it was ever going to be resolved, and it was all very dramatic and very tragic and desperate, but I am delighted to announce that it all worked out in the end, and we're back up and running now, so we're going to get straight back into it. And this is me talking to Craig, and we just finished talking about the fact that he started off reading, and they first started performing this Misterman production in the States back in 2014. When you first encountered the play, was it a leap to say, yeah, we can do this? Because it must have been so kind of weird. You're constantly kind of hitting speed bumps just reading the script, going, how do I say that in order to make it make sense?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a leap always when you're stepping into another dialect, another culture, another playwright, another world completely. But that's also, those leaps do encounter those speed bumps. But ultimately, I think the fun of it is that you grow from all of those encounters, those speed bumps, those hiccups. You hopefully overcome them or work around them in a way that makes you a stronger artist somehow. Yeah.
Do you get have you had feedback at home from people who say, oh my God, is it really like that over there? Who think that these are really accurate representations of Irish people?
I wouldn't say that we've received feedback like that, because the people he meets in the town as he goes around to recreate his day, there are characteristics that are common for like archetypal people you meet in every town. So if you're from a smaller town, and when we incubated the show and worked on it for a month, we were in a small town, and as we went about, we were like, oh, that's so and so, oh, that's so and so, each character. But it's much more on point, and like taking the lens and zooming in, being here and walking down the street and go, oh, there's Mrs. O'Leary. Oh, there's Mr. McInerney. And like really you see a different texture.
Yeah, well, since you've arrived in Ireland, have you kind of gone, whoa, this is like a cultural reference that you didn't have before? Or have you been to Ireland before when you were able to already, you had those snapshots in your head?
I have been to Ireland before, right. Not for as long as we will be here now. But I think now I have the lens of the show on. When I came here before, I was on holidays, so I was like, watching the people, and a lot of people. I'm like, oh, my uncle looks like that guy, right? Because of my own heritage. But I would say that having the lens of the show and being immersed in our process right now, it's completely, my ears and how I watch things are completely different.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about the actual production. How much of the way your interpretation of the show is actually in the script, and how much of it is open and almost like begging for answers? Because I know that some scripts are written with like no indication of who says which part of the dialogue, and others are extraordinarily specific about how things should be set up. Where does it come on that spectrum?
I would say in the script it becomes clear who should say what, even though Enda doesn't actually write, like when Thomas plays more than one role, he doesn't write like this line is McInerney's, this line is Thomas's. Really? You kind of figure that out, but it's broken up that way on the page to identify that. I would say that's something we've tried to stay true to the text, but also realize that it needs like our own stamp on it, right. That makes it our style as a production.
Does it have a specific setting, or did you have to come up with that?
So he offers that it's a dilapidated warehouse or factory, and what we did when we went and incubated it, when this one of the theaters that we worked at in the States, they said, you can do the show. And we said, we don't need a set designer. We'll do it ourselves. And we realized that he needs different areas to be these people. And you can see that in the set. But what was really fun is that Craig is very crafty. So we went kind of dumpster diving and prop hunting and what the theater actually had. And I would put out items and say, well, this is, Simple Eamon Moran's garage. Like, these are the pieces I think you can use. You have a half hour, build me something. And then from that, our set came. So it's actually very actor driven with the set, which then helps him with his character in return.
I think, and one of the gems of it all was that the theater that originally hired us to do this production in the States, where we incubated for a month and then ran for a month, was it was a reclaimed old paint shop. So, and those people had left in the middle of the night, and they left everything. So it was full of all kinds of stuff that even the theater was like, we don't know what to do with it. We don't know what to dump it yet. And so we had free reign to take all kinds of stuff. So the pallet racking was actually a happy accident because it was in the space, and they were saying, do something with it, please. Paint buckets, take them, do something, Wow.
Yeah. So our set here, because we didn't travel with anything except the reel-to-reels and a few intricate prop pieces, is we went to the Oxfam home in Dublin, and we met this great guy, Paul, and we said, hey, we see this label has free on it. What other items do you have in the store that are free or you potentially like to get rid of? And we brought in a van, and he went to town with us, and most of the pieces you see are from that exchange, which is great. And when we rolled in here, we wiped everything outside, and then we started building.
We bought a few items too. We did.
Yeah, of course,
Is there a temptation to go into a space and go, all site-specific on it and go, we're going to go use the stairs and we're going to use the hallway out here and we're going to bring the audience with us and do all that kind of thing because you're adapting to each space that you go into?
Yeah, I would say that the more, I think if we don't use what is offered in the actual energy or aesthetic of the space, we're doing a disservice to the story we're trying to tell. So instead of saying, I want this space to adapt to us, it's how do we adapt to the space? And the granary is a great space to adapt to. It already has a great texture to it that serves the play. So we're spoiled. Who knows what will happen in our next venues?
Who knows? Who knows what will happen here? This is the beginning of your Irish run. This is like a big, like a springboard to something pretty extraordinary for you. For a show that you've performed in the States, you're now coming to present it to an Irish audience for the first time. How does that feel for you? Is it nerve-wracking, or are you like, yes, this is like a message in a bottle coming to shore finally?
Oh my God, it's completely nerve-wracking. But
it shouldn't be. Irish audiences are fun. They just want to see a good show.
Yeah, no, everybody's been very generous so far. So we have no choice but just to do the work and keep our heads down and be as honest as possible and walk away with that. So.
Well, I have to say, the only time that I heard of Misterman being performed was when it was just newly minted, and it was Enda Walsh playing the part himself. And I think that people know of it, but and obviously everybody in this town knows of Enda Walsh, but they don't probably know much about this show. So I do think you're going to get a very enthusiastic audience.
Oh, well, wonderful.
Yeah,
let's have them. I can't wait to have them either. Yeah.
Brilliant. Guys, it sounds like it's going to be amazing. Thank you very much for taking the time out.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Adrian, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.